Thanks to Brilliant for sponsoring this video and supporting my channel. So last week I did a video summarizing 3 of the biggest ideas in this book right here, Atomic Habits by James Clear. And that's the only Dr. Seuss-esque line I'm going to use in this video, but I just couldn't help it. But like I said in that video, this is one of the better self-development books that I've ever read, and when it comes to building habits, I think this is the best habit building book that I've ever read. But while those 3 big ideas we discussed in that video do kind of encapsulate the strategic component of building habits, they aren't the entire picture. Because as anybody who's ever studied business will tell you, to run a successful business, you need 2 things, strategy and tactics. Strategy being the foundational sort of bird's eye view, huge ideas that really form the foundation of everything you're trying to do, and tactics being the more in the trenches plans that allow you to carry out the strategy on a day-to-day basis, in addition to dealing with whatever crap life happens to throw your way. And while running a business and building habits in your everyday life aren't completely identical goals, they do have one key component in which they are very, very alike, which is that you need both strategy and tactics. And luckily, Atomic Habits also deals with this more tactical question. In fact, Clear lays out 4 different rules for making habits stick over the long term and making sure that you stick with them even when life inevitably gets in your way. So in today's video, we are going to summarize those 4 rules, and I'm going to give you my thoughts on each of them. So let's get started with rule number 1, which is to make it obvious. Any habit that you're trying to build shouldn't come with question marks on it. Where am I going to do it? How do I do it? When do I do it? If you're asking these questions, you're already getting off on the wrong foot. One of my favorite quotes from this book is actually one of my favorite quotes in general, which is that you do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. And if your system hasn't defined a clear picture of what a habit is supposed to be, then you're not really going to know what to do. For instance, I will eat more vegetables is unclear. How do you know on any given day that you've actually completed that goal? Is a single baby carrot enough? Well, if you've set your system in an unclear way, or if you set the bare minimum so low, then on many days you're gonna find yourself falling to that bare minimum, eating a baby carrot and saying, hey, I ate vegetables. And that's the thing, on really busy days or days when you're feeling just really, really tired or unmotivated, you can bet that you are going to just fall to the bare minimum requirement that your system has set. And over time, this can lead to self-sabotage, because while you are technically fulfilling the requirements of the system, the results you get through that habit, through that practice, are so infinitesimally small that you don't see real progress over time. You're basically just kind of stalled out. But you can easily fix this by making the goal obvious, by setting some specific requirements that give you a very clear bare minimum that's actually going to get you results. So going back to our vegetables goal, instead of saying I will eat more vegetables, which is again very unclear, maybe say something like I will eat 1 full serving of vegetables every day at lunch except for on Sundays, and fries don't count. I don't know who thinks fries are a vegetable, but hey, we got to be specific here, right? But you can see how this very clear minimum requirement makes it a lot harder to cheat yourself in the long term. And it also makes it a lot more obvious what you're supposed to be doing on a day-to-day basis. And if you want to make this even more obvious, then it's a good idea to have a written record of your past accomplishments, of your past compliance with the habit that you've set out. In other words, track your habits. We human beings have a very fallible memory. Sometimes it's hard to remember what we did yesterday, let alone 2 weeks ago. So if you have an actual concrete record of what you've done, you'll often find it motivating, and you'll find it more easy to keep doing this in the future. Now, when it comes to tracking your habits, there are a ton of different methods out there. If you're a fan of pen and paper, I did a video earlier this year about something called the Martin system, which my friend Martin created and a lot of people seem to like. So I'll have a link in the description for that video, but there are also tons of habit tracking apps out there. Habitica being my favorite one because it brings in lots of video game design elements. And video game designers have had probably about 40 years at this point to study psychology and figure out what motivates players to keep playing their games. So you can take those insights, put them into a habit tracking app, and at least in my experience, it makes it a lot more motivating to use. Of course, you could also just mark things off on the calendar, mark each day as you do the habit, which Jerry Seinfeld is very famous for having done with writing jokes, and that's why this is often called the Seinfeld effect. But whatever you do, calendar calendar, app, Martin system, whatever it is, simply tracking your habits is going to make it more obvious every single day what you're supposed to be doing because you have a record. Now, this isn't always going to be enough. Just making a habit obvious isn't going to ensure that you're going to do it. So let's talk about the second rule on Claire's list, which is to make it attractive. The idea here is to pair the habit that you're trying to build, which is often difficult, requires self-discipline, requires motivation and willpower, with something that you already like to do. And this can be especially important in the early stages of this habit, where again, it's taking mostly willpower for you to do it because it hasn't yet worn a well-worn neural pathway that makes it an automatic behavior, or I guess in definition, a habit. To give you an example, my friend Martin wrote the script for this video, and like me, he doesn't necessarily like writing, especially when it's nonfiction productivity scripts. But there are two settings in which he can make himself get into the writing habit and get started by tweaking his environment to make it a little bit more enjoyable. The first one is at home. He'll clean off his desk, he'll make a fresh cup of tea since he's a tea drinker, and he'll light a candle. So he's making his home environment a bit more attractive as a writing space. Alternatively, sometimes he actually goes out in his car and will park somewhere in nature where he can look at trees and writes a script on his iPad. Personally, I do not get the allure of writing in my car. I think it would be very uncomfortable, but hey, whatever works for him, works for him. And whatever works for you will work for you. So try to tweak your environment in a way that makes it more enjoyable to get into this habit. You could also create what I like to call Jedi councils, which is just my nerdy term for a mastermind group. I don't really like the term mastermind group because a lot of those fake gurus love to use it, so I'm gonna go with Jedi council. But essentially, a Jedi council is just a group of like-minded people who have similar levels of ambition who agree to get on a call every week or every 2 weeks and support each other. I was on the same Jedi Council call with the same 4 people for about 4 years. And every couple of weeks, we get on a call and we talk about what we had done over the past couple of weeks. Every week, somebody would be in the hot seat. They would kind of do a deep dive on the struggles they were having, what they were trying to do in their business or in their goals. And we'd all just sort of provide support and encouragement and accountability. And at the end of that call, everyone would say, here's what I'm going to do in the next 2 weeks. Keep me accountable. And one thing I've noticed with friends is that often friends are too close to you, they like you too much to really hold your feet to the fire with a goal. Maybe some friends will actually do it, but a lot of friends will sort of forgive you when you fall off the horse, which is not always what you need. Sometimes you need somebody who's kind of at arm's length, who cares about you, but they care about you in a way in which they're going to really hold your feet to the fire and ask you, why did you not do what you said you were gonna do? You know, they're not gonna take any excuses from you. So it can be very, very helpful to form a group like this. The accountability these people provide you might not always be enough to help you hurdle the difficulties involved in sticking with your habit long term, which is why sometimes you need to look for a way to reduce that difficulty. In other words, make it easy. The main thing we're looking to do here is to remove as much friction as possible from whatever positive habit that you're trying to build. So for an example, let's talk about guitar for a second. It took me all of 2 seconds to go and grab this guitar off the stand over there. Now, when I bought this guitar, when I bought my first guitar in Colorado, they always tell me the same thing. You live in Colorado, which is a very dry environment. So you need to buy a case and you need to keep the guitar in the case as much as possible. And you also need to buy this humidification device, which you have to fill with distilled water every 2 days. Otherwise, the guitar is gonna crack over time and become worthless. And I understand what they're saying and they're not wrong. But here's the thing. I did that at first, diligently, when I bought my first guitar here in Colorado. And as a result, I almost never played it because it was locked in the case. It would take me, probably 20-25 seconds to go get the case, unlock it, take the stupid humidifier out of the strings, and then get myself ready to play. So now I've said, you know what? I don't care if my guitars crack over time. I will buy a new guitar 40 years down the line when my old one has worn itself out, because in exchange, by keeping my guitars out all over the house on stands, just ready to play, ready to pick up whenever I have a whim to play, I play much more often. And as a result, I've seen my skill grow so much faster. And the funny thing is, I don't even have to make it obvious for this goal. I don't have to say, I will practice guitar and do these scale patterns every single day for 20 minutes. It's just easy. I love to play guitar, It is something that takes work, but because the guitar is right there, whether I'm upstairs, whether I'm down here in the studio, whenever I have a spare moment, I'll often pick it up. And about half the time I pick it up, I'll end up making something up that I really like and want to record. So make it easy. Remove the friction involved in getting into whatever habit that you want to do. Another way to make a habit easy is to start with baby steps, or in other words, to set the bare minimum, at least at first, at a level that you know you can accomplish every single day, even if something weird and unexpected comes up and interrupts your day, even if life gets in your way. So for example, and Martin put this in the script, I think to annoy me, but if you're trying to meditate, which I don't like to do, and you set your goal immediately at 10 minutes per day, you might find that your mind is not used to 10 minutes of meditation. My mind isn't even used to 30 seconds of meditation. It's just not for me. But if you're trying to get into a meditation habit, it might be more useful to set a 2-minute goal to start. 2 minutes is something you could absolutely do every single day. You probably meditate for 2 minutes while waiting in line at the grocery store. And if you can get your mind used to the feeling of stillness for 2 minutes, you'll be able to slowly work yourself up to 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, half an hour, whatever people who meditate like to do. I also find this works for writing. When I was writing my book, 10 Steps to Earning Awesome Grades, I set my bare minimum goal at 500 words per day because I knew if I had to, I could write 500 words sitting on the toilet. They might not be very good, but I could do it. And in some days, I found myself pushing past that 500 word minimum goal. Some days I would write 3,000 words, but I knew if I set my goal at 3,000 words per day, on a lot of days I was going to fail. So set a baby steps goal and don't worry about what your results are right now if you're only sticking to the bare minimum. As Clear writes in the book, you should be far more concerned with your current trajectory, the direction in which you're going, extrapolated based on the points of data you already have, than with your current results. In other words, ask yourself, where am I headed? With the steps that you've been making, with the incremental bumps you've been making, where are you gonna be in the future? Well, if you like how that future looks, then don't worry about where you are right now, because where you are right now represents your training ground. It's kind of like this episode of Dragon Ball I used to watch when I was a kid, where Goku had to run around with this giant 100-pound turtle shell on his back, and he could run very, very slowly and could barely jump, but the moment he takes it off, he could jump like 100 feet in the air. I thought that was real in 5th grade, and I thought I'd be able to jump 100 feet in the air if I put a turtle shell on my back or like carried weights around. That's fake, but the idea is there, isn't it? So let's move on to the 4th rule in the book, which is to make it satisfying. So part of what makes building a habit so difficult is something that the human brain kind of hasn't wired itself to fully accept yet, and that's the concept of delayed gratification. This is when you forego a present reward, a short-term reward, in order to get a future and hopefully better reward. And this comes up a lot in modern day life because we love to make big plans that right now might cost a lot of effort, money, and time, but that potentially won't pay off for a very, very long time. And I say this happens more often now because in the modern day, a lot of us can reliably count on that future existing. So we go to school, or we start that scrappy business in our garage, or we save it for that PS5. But for most of human history, we were hunter-gatherers who had to rely on what we could get right now. And wild PS5s are very hard to catch. So as the saying goes, 1 PS5 in the hand is worth 2 PS5s in the book. In other words, if you don't know that your next meal is coming, then you learn to prioritize what you can get right now over future potential maybe rewards. Loss aversion becomes a very, very useful survival mechanism when the potential consequence is starvation. And we've never fully escaped this mindset. This deep-seated brain wiring takes a long time to change. Our external environment has changed relatively rapidly. Seems like it's been thousands of years, but in terms of brain wiring, well, that's pretty darn quick, and the brain just hasn't had time to catch up. As Claire points out in the book, because of how we are wired, most people will spend all day chasing quick hits of satisfaction. And you can see how this might be a little bit counterproductive for building strong habits, since a lot of habits aren't immediately satisfying and take a bit of discipline to get you toward their eventual goal. So what we need is some metaphorical way of getting all 3 PS5s. We need something that motivates you to stick with the habit long term, but that gives you something satisfying in the moment. In other words, we want to bundle some sort of short-term reward with the long-term rewards gained through the habit. Now, there are really bad ways to set this up. For example, if you are a runner and you're trying to go on a run every single day, maybe giving yourself an unhealthy snack as a reward isn't the best idea. For one, eating as little as 3 Oreos could actually counteract the calories burned in an 8-minute mile. And while not everyone's going to care about that, that is something worth considering. But number 2, you could actually end up building a bad habit through rewarding yourself for sticking to a good one. And that's just not really a good thing to be doing. So instead, find a way to give yourself a short-term reward that is helpful in and of itself. For example, if you go for that run, maybe reward yourself by coming back and listening to an audiobook or spending the time when you're cooling down reading a fiction book. That way you also get some reading time in, but you're also rewarding yourself for going for that run. Another potential short-term reward here might be just the simple and sweet dopamine release of checking off a checkbox. Personally, I love writing out my daily plan on my whiteboard so I can check off those checkboxes as I go. And I briefly mentioned habit tracking systems earlier, but another great benefit of marking down your progress is simply having a record of your success and deriving satisfaction from being able to look back on that record. In any case, finding these short-term rewards or being creative and coming up with your own can be especially valuable in the beginning because, like I said in the last video, the compounding effect of your skill building journey really hasn't started to show its power yet. In the beginning, your daily 1% improvements still might not add up to all that much, and you might be feeling a little bit discouraged about your results. So if you compare that with a reward, at least until the compounding effect has really started to show, you're gonna be able to stick it out through that initial difficult period. Additionally, it just feels good to see a long, unbroken streak of successes. But if you do end up failing, like I said in the last video, and I feel compelled to reiterate here, don't beat yourself up about it. Avoid what Clear calls the second mistake, the secondary data point that causes a failure to transform from an outlier, an anomaly, to something that indicates a trajectory towards failure. If you can avoid making that second mistake, if you can avoid starting that trajectory, then a mistake is just that. It's a mistake. It remains in the past and it doesn't really hurt you all that much. So to quickly summarize this summary, for whatever habit you're trying to build, consider these 4 rules. Make it easy, make it obvious, make it attractive, and make it satisfying. Implement just one of these rules onto any habit you're building, and I think you're gonna have a much easier time sticking to it over the long term. And if you think about these 4 rules a little bit more broadly, you can probably see that they actually apply to more than just personal habit building, and that they're used in a lot of the products and tools that you use every single day. For instance, if you're somebody who wants to get better at math or science or computer science, a tool like Brilliant might be a lot more easy to use on a day-to-day basis and to stick to because the people who build Brilliant understand these habit building rules, which is why when you get into one of their courses, instead of having a very long piece of text to read, you're almost immediately thrown into some sort of bite-sized interactive problem that gets you results right away. And because you're getting active immediately and you're getting the satisfaction of using the material to solve a problem, like in their algorithms course where you learn to drag different blocks around to make a correctly formatted algorithm, you gain the satisfaction required to push through. They're using that satisfaction principle right away. They're using that attractive principle right away. Of course, there are a lot of other reasons to use Brilliant besides these rules here. For instance, they have more than 60 in-depth courses in their library, including a full math suite that starts from the basics of number theory and goes all the way up to calculus and probability and math for quantitative trading and finance, along with science courses like gravitational physics and computer science courses like their Python programming course and that algorithms course that I mentioned earlier. And if you're one of the first 200 people to go over to brilliant.org/thomasfrank and sign up, you're even gonna get 20% off your annual premium Brilliant subscription. So check them out, and as always, thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you found something helpful and actionable in this video. Again, I highly recommend reading this book in its entirety. It is one of the better self-development books that I've read, so highly recommend this. I'll have a link in the description down below. And as always, if you did like this video, hitting that like button is a great way to tell the YouTube algorithm to push this channel out to more people. So thank you if you do that. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button right there, because next month I've got a couple of great videos coming out specifically on some personal finance topics. A lot of you have been asking me about investing and credit cards, so I'm working on videos for both of those topics. So hit that subscribe button and make sure you don't miss out on those. Additionally, I'm gonna have a couple of more videos and a playlist right here all about habits and self-discipline, so check that out. Or you can check out my music channel if you are interested in the whole guitar segment. I'll put a link right there. And beyond that, if you don't want to do any of this, then I don't know, go skateboard in an empty pool or something, because as always, I'm not your dad.